Bitcoin is not special because of number, because of any of that stuff. It is special because when you get past this human slavery paradigm, which has been most of our history, it is what prevents it from happening again.
What some folks are doing, issuing securities to purchase Bitcoin, is weaponizing the USD price of Bitcoin and creating unknown negative convexity in the future.
You know, we've always thought of ourselves as being the Trojan horse. We're Trojan horsing the state. We're Trojan horsing Wall Street. I'm beginning to get a feeling that they're not stupid. They understand the Trojan horse concept. They're putting as many chains around that Trojan horse as possible not to let us out of the horse. And then they're pulling it through the gate, and they're going to use it the way they want to use it.
This is not going to be one financial. This is going to be one physical. This is going to come down to the men willing to die for their women and children and the heirs of their children.
What is real? How do you define real?
You can't jump into cash. Cash is trash. What do? You get out.
Joining me tonight for a very exciting group talk is Paul Tarantino, CEO of Byte Federal, Chris Sullivan, co-founder and portfolio manager of Hyperion Decimus, and John Burnett, founder of Digital Privacy Sessions. One of the reasons I brought us all together tonight was because of the fascinating panel you guys got into at Bitcoin Day in Naples about a month ago. And that panel was prepping for fiat failure, you know, the fight for freedom. So I kind of wanted to talk or get into a lot of topics that were shared there. Framing it up is really, you know, what are people missing? And I'll kick it to Paul to kind of start. And, you know, how is Trump's announcement in Nashville a double-edged sword? Because I've been thinking a lot about this ever sort of you brought that notion up to me.
So, you know, in Nashville, the language I picked up on there and that I since picked up with Eric Trump saying the same thing was congratulations, Bitcoiners. Not wow, you guys are on to something, or wow, Bitcoin's super impressive. It's like congratulations. Like you found the golden ticket. You know, you're all going to get rich. And that's not the language you use when you've discovered what Bitcoin can provide, right? That's the language you use. I'm like, okay, we're going to take this thing, we're going to run number go up, we're going to use it for the benefit of the state, and you just happen to get lucky. And so to me, I instantly heard that as like, you guys don't see Bitcoin the way I see it. You are going to try and use it against us. And an analogy that I later came up with was, you know, we've always thought of ourselves as being the Trojan horse, that like we're plunging through the gates and we're Trojan horsing the state. We're Trojan horsing Wall Street. I'm beginning to get a feeling that, you know, they're not stupid. They understand the Trojan horse concept, and they're putting as many chains around that Trojan horse as possible not to let us out of the horse. And then they're pulling it through the gate, and they're going to use it the way they want to use it. So to me, it's a double-edged sword. There's going to be a lot of Bitcoiners that think this is a win because number goes up. But at the end of the day, if it's 100% KYC, if it's 100%, you know, you can't move Bitcoin unless you're fully verified. We're losing a lot of value in the network. We're losing the what does Tone Vays like to say, you know, the ability to not censor the transactions, essentially. I forget the exact words he used, but yeah. And if these transactions, if Bitcoin transactions become stoppable as opposed to currently unstoppable, because there's so much KYT, KYC, and KYB, we're gonna give up a lot. And unfortunately, I think a lot of the newbies coming on are jumping in that bandwagon without asking any questions.
John, you know, what do you think? Like, what was really interesting to me is the notion of, you know, a lot of people see number grow up as like this huge panacea. And I agree with a lot of what Paul is saying. I feel like we're being led into the carnival and the whole ride is, number go up, and there's all these like shiny mirrors all around us and lights and spectacle. No one's paying attention to what's maybe really happening beyond number go up. And, you flip it and you start thinking about, okay, if number goes up a lot, which is what we all kind of think about mathematically, well, that's really sort of prepping for fiat failure. Like, what happens when fiat dies? And, something that also kind of came up during the panel was, is this all in the future, or, what are we missing now? And so John, like, how do you, thinking about what Paul said, and just also maybe how are you prepping for fiat failure?
Yeah, I think this is so much bigger than just a financial thing. And when people start thinking of Bitcoin as an investment, then they get latched on to the number go up. And it's obviously good to have more resources, but I think we have to see what money is really. And it's not just human control. It is literally keeping us in an unnatural state where it's the manipulation of human energy, basically. And so when we think about just number go up, that's not freedom. Bitcoin is like, if we have any mechanism by which to siphon off human energy in the form of money, then over time that can be collected. It can be then used as a resource to further suppress the population, mostly by mind control. And so over time, and the what we're up against is playing the slow, long game with a lot more information than we have. And so the only way to prevent this predicament in the future is to have a non-leaky bucket of human energy to where it cannot be siphoned off to be used against us. So when people are thinking about financial gain and an asset and all of these things, it is far too zoomed in for the epic battle that the human race is in right now. And this is far older, far more complicated, far more grandiose. And they've built basically a construct around us to where we believe in a situation and in a reality which doesn't exist. And they've done this over time by using this energy against us through various means. So we're all zoomed in at the microscopic level, and we need to get a 30,000 foot view and start seeing what the real game is.
Man, I think you really touched on something with the mind control, because right now, my sense is that at a faster pace than I've witnessed, a lot of people are waking up. Simultaneously, the pressure to suppress that wake up is accelerating. So we're rapidly accelerating to this point of contact between whatever percent of humanity wakes up to partially discovering what the truth might be, to radically accelerating oppression through mind control technology, vaccines, and other means that are trying to prevent that wake up.
I should clarify, when I mean mind control, I should define it as believing in a reality which isn't true. I don't necessarily mean, some kind of signal going into your brain and, robotically controlling you.
But John, that is what it is. These NPCs are, look at the rioting and gaslighting from the politicians corralling the rioters against the exposure of facts, right? Facts and truth don't need defense. They're not emotional, right? And they're not sentient either. So I think we maybe need to not even worry about those people, because Paul, you're right. Like, there is that rate of change of both going together, right? The fighting side and then the awakening side. But it's too late. If you're already not there in that trajectory, and you know this, John, like, the time and energy that humanity needs to spend to remain human, not transhuman, and to be less demonic and less destructive, the hour's late. It's literally now or never, because the poisoning of the atmosphere and environment's at a level we can't sustain but a few years. And then the sustain of the population by the producers of the takers isn't going to sustain. The usury across every spectrum of every aspect of humanity cannot sustain. So that's where all this is coming to head now. Maybe that means 50 years, right, between now and where it ends, or is it 3 months? We don't know, because time is somewhat relative.
Yeah, I when I think of mind control too, I'm always thinking about our historical models, right? It's like what we believe to be true from the past. I think a lot of people are discovering that their religious views, their understanding of history, their understanding of what caused certain wars, why certain things happened to the United States or to Europe or any government that was overthrown, they're finally coming to just a glimpse of an alternative truth that seems to be adding up, and in doing so, they start to question things. Hopefully, that leads them to question what's happening with money today. And I think but what I keep finding so interesting is that I talk to so many people about all these different topics, and then I try to introduce. When I hear those people talk, I hear the Bitcoiner in them, and as soon as I talk about Bitcoin and it's technical and it's technology based, they lose complete trust in it. So there's a big channel of people that are potentially Bitcoiners that are fully distrustful, and I guess I can understand it from a certain perspective, distrustful of the very fact that it's technology driven.
Yeah, but they then trust gold, Paul, or
Yeah.
much like, yeah, there's some paper Bitcoin and some KYC, and yes, there's some price impact and manipulation.
Right.
But relative to what's happened to gold and silver very specifically, and the utter commanding of the price controls via COMEX and LBMA, like there's not even like 1 ounce of reality in the price, right?
100%.
Or 1 ounce of healthy price discovery. So sure, Mr. or Mrs. Goldbug, I'm with you. I'd still buy some bullion. I bought it on the 2600 dip too. But like this order of magnitude versus this much of Bitcoin, because I'm not running out of my house with 50 bars of gold. Sorry, that doesn't add to my prepper stash. It's always going to be a precious metal. But it's wrought with all kinds of, environmental and then time preference differences that Bitcoin, and it serves humanity much differently than Bitcoin does, and in fewer ways. So they can pretend all they want, but like I just said, and I don't mean to be cynical here, but if you're not awakening and you're not getting it now, the hour is just late. And the Bitcoin community is largely, this is my criticism of it, is largely focused on tangents and things that are adjacent to the freedom movement, the libertarian movement, the transparency or anti-state movement, and are focused on like what I'll pick on. I mean, I'm going to get a ton of shit for this, but what some folks are doing, issuing securities to purchase Bitcoin, is weaponizing the USD price of Bitcoin and creating unknown negative convexity in the future.
Okay, explain that for a non-hedge fund manager.
Well, also, I'd like maybe we could elaborate on what you see as the great taking.
What do you mean? It's already happened.
Okay, how's it happening? Because I don't think people see it or feel it.
Yeah. Oh my God. Okay.
The table is set, my friend.
Yeah. You already have no anything, dude. Like from literal, like Social Security bonds. John, I know you know all this. To you don't own your land. You don't own your securities. You don't own shit. They already took it all legally. It's already gone. And sorry to get angry, but like the taking has occurred. The dematerialization of property rights to all assets is finished across the entire planet. There's not one jurisdiction on earth, and there's only one type of real estate title called a allodial title that you could even get that you become an owner. And it's really difficult to do. John?
Yeah, I mean, this has to do with the way that our countries have been co-opted. So the United States of America is, in all caps, is a corporation, and we live under corporate rule. And there's actually a really good book. I have it here so people can look it up. Take Back Your Sovereignty, or Reclaim Your Sovereignty. It lays out kind of historically how that happened. Mm-hmm. And so we're not living in the paradigm which we think. And so we are basically in a corporate rule under executive order from the head of this giant corporation, and every state and every county is basically a subsidiary. And it is trapping us into this maritime legal system where there is one of the greatest lines in that book is that in order to make it legal, they had to leave a hole in the fence. And this hole in the fence is very hard for people to get out, even if they realize that this facade of a construct even exists. So we live in a corporate rule, and I feel they are trying to shove it from corporate rule to technocracy through AI, through this, it's been, 100 years ago, they were talking about the North American technate, and now Trump is talking about Greenland and Canada and all of this stuff. You have Elon Musk, which is a giant technocrat. His grandfather was. You have Peter Thiel, which funded the Vice President Vance's whole career. And so it goes from a small blip of potential human freedom, which was, I would argue, largely unsuccessful holistically, that we didn't necessarily win the Revolutionary War, at least not without major concessions. And you can see that through the Treaty of Paris and other things. And so we're in a paradigm which most people are just simply unaware of. And generationally, then they use this energy, which they sucked through the theft of human time, human spirit, to then program us into a different way of thinking. And so even more difficult is, how do we get out of it? Well, most people then, they believe what they believe, because 3 generations, then you say, oh, my grandfather said this, and those were the wise ones. And they largely were, but they were also caught in this paradigm and this lie. And so then people will argue with bias for what they already believe, and you have to disprove that 100% before they let it go, and you have to prove something against their belief system 100% before they'll accept it. And then there's the point of ontological shock, where it's just too shocking to their worldview that they just shut it all out. And so until we can get past that and realize that we got to chew through a whole bunch of scary to get to the good stuff, to get to the solutions, to get to how we opt out, to get that we are much different than we were told, our beings, then, that's how we win this. We don't win it by simply hodling and going back to the Super Bowl. And so I think this is where all of these constructs, every construct, whether it's religion, whether it's government, they are all manipulated for the purpose of human control. And I would argue that we have largely never been free. We've never experienced true freedom. And there's parts in lost history, which you can say arguably it was there for some amount of time. And the Bitcoin is not special because of number, because of any of that stuff. It is special because when you get past this human slavery paradigm, which has been most of our history, it is what prevents it from happening again. And it is an impenetrable shield, if we are successful, that keeps those that would meddle with the human spirit from meddling with the human spirit. And you get into all kinds of other things, Jeff Booth's book, Deflation, et cetera, that's all super valid and true. It's a great book. The Price of Tomorrow, but it gets far deeper than that when you consider that even energy scarcity is a myth, right? We have abundant energy all around us, and in order to control humans, we need to control all these aspects, and they got us here over many, many, many hundreds, if not thousands of years. And so again, we need to realize the game at stake if we're gonna get out of it. And so it is literally like the Truman Show And if Truman were to walk out of the Truman Show, then he'd just be in a much bigger dome, right? And he'd walk out and he'd just be with a lot more Trumans. And the purpose of the first dome was only to make him believe that the second one was real. And so we have to keep zooming out, and we have to keep at that hunt for truth and not be satisfied by the little goodies that were thrown out by the powers that be.
God, dude, you just described Doge to a T.
Exactly. Yeah,
But
that's
Exactly what's going on right now.
There's a bunch of examples.
Hey Bitcoiners, invest in Bitcoin with confidence. Why do I recommend River? River is the best place to build your Bitcoin wealth, and they offer 0 fee on recurring buys. Proven full reserve custody. Earn 3.8% interest on cash paid in Bitcoin. Put your cash to work and earn Bitcoin. Cash is FDIC insured, no hidden fees or minimums, and withdraw your cash at any time. River makes it simple and secure to save your wealth in Bitcoin. Get $100 when you sign up and buy Bitcoin on River at river.com/matrix.
Bitcoin is like a many means to an end, or no end, basically. And it's a higher consciousness asset, it's a higher consciousness process. But John, one thing that you said, these goodies, it's going in both directions, right? You've got some of the paralyzation of the mind. We're seeing like, okay, you left-hard Democrat, whatever you want, communist, Marxist, whatever, you're so gone. You have so severe Stockholm syndrome that, wait, money going to XYZ thing that you didn't vote for, you didn't sign up for, you don't agree with, your response is to scream at someone disagreeing with you because you can't articulate your complaint or your problem with it. You can't counter argue with substantive fact to defend, well, it went to this is what justified it. It's just and panic in these crazy people and NPCs. And it's very sad. The powers that ought not to be, globalist, cabal, whatever you want to call them, right? They have really done a number on arguably 5 to 8 generations of humans, at least in the forefathers generation. They knew what they were fighting against, right? They did win even despite all odds, and then they kept having to fight against it, right? Again in 1812, and then Andrew Jackson had to fight against it, and then okay, look at Cuckboy Woodrow Wilson, right? And then he unleashes the Kraken, right? And since 1913, it's just every end of the earth, in every aspect, the frequencies, the food, the geoengineering, blah 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 blah, right? And it's really really sad. But what I think gives or should give everyone solace, and maybe cause some fear in others, is that this is not going to be one financially. This is going to be one physically. This is going to come down to the men willing to die for their women and children and the heirs of their children to end this. The forefathers thought that they were doing it. We know who they are. We know how to do it. It's got to be a consolidated effort between good humans versus bad humans / demon entity, whatever's.
Yeah.
Or the success that they've had is going to rapidly increase.
I think we're right on the edge of that. I see Doge and the disclosure of corruption accelerating at a massive pace.
Mm-hmm.
That disclosure is going to do just what John said, which is, just melt people's minds. Normies are going to have complete collapse about their belief structure, what they believe to be true. That is also going to empower and infuriate a significant percentage of people that were aware and are done. And this is going to be the conflict I think Chris talks about. I think we're literally a few months away from that type of acceleration. And that's a realignment with what I think Chris was describing from the founding fathers, which is this idea that if you died a moral death, if you died defending morality, that it was a good death,
It's
and
the
that it
only
was
kind of good death.
right, and that pursuing that was an honorable thing to pursue. I mean, we fought wars over far less than the shit that we're going to learn about in the next 3 months. And that I think is I think it was why the powers that be are trying so desperately to accelerate on so many fronts, because this is that thing that they see coming to a head.
And they've spent time destroying the warrior bloodlines for hundreds of years. John knows this really well too.
Yeah.
And the reality of all these, there's been really like 6 or 7 material revolutions in, call it the history bank, that we are aware of. And the numbers are always massively against you. The odds are massively against you. The technology is massively against you. But here's this one instance in human history right now where we've got exactly what Friedrich Hayek would like humanity to have in Bitcoin. We have global, instantaneous, decentralized communication where we can do comms and ops across all continents with one another, right? And we know that our enemy is a very specific group and a collective. And what are their NGOs and their entities that span out from their succubus at the top, right? And they're guilty of the stuff I won't ever even repeat, right? And once you realize that, and it doesn't black pill you and make you a non-functioning human, then you harken back to two things that I know I keep talking about the forefathers, because they were really the last ones to battle this physically. But Ben Franklin, 10 years before the Declaration of Independence was signed, he said the following in many, many periodicals: join or die, right? And then what is the other common phrase that we attribute to our forefathers? Rebellion against tyranny is obedience to God. And this is where we're at right this moment. And I love it because I don't have to worry about this much longer. But I want to give people that power, that stop worrying about number go up. Stop worrying about what the television's telling you. This is a existential, paradigm shifting, timeline adjusting moment. And we should do our best to take advantage of the opportunity we're given here.
Yeah.
Chris, what do you mean? Like George Washington's great grandson you mentioned in Naples, gone. We don't know where he is, or he's been murdered. I mean, could you, sort of elaborate on that? Like, and maybe lost history a little bit, because I never really thought of like, oh, where are George Washington's grandchildren? How come they're not paraded around the country, at every baseball game or parade? But I just never thought about it.
And that's part of the design. I mean, John, jump in here too. Like from every lineage, Spartan, Nordic, the Berserkers, Anglos, like they've, and then very good example of it is the Patriot warrior bloodlines of France were all murdered by this same cabal group through Napoleon. And then the Battle of Waterloo was like, they're going to go ahead and execute the rest of them on purpose. It was a setup, right? So that's one of the best modern day examples. And then you have countless of these false flag operations, unjustified wars in the Middle East, where they're sending our best, brightest, heaviest trained into situations where they know a certain probability you're going to die. Then most of our military history in the United States in the modern realm, they've tested and demoed all kinds of bioweapons and vaccines on these boys, right? So they always come with like, here's my 30 agendas going into one vector, right? And what I've noticed over reading history over countless years, as they've usurped power and control, either via poison, physical death, etc., they've tried to neuter and demasculine and de-warrior all of the male groups that they're ruling over. John, did I miss anything?
No, and I think that we have to start wrapping our head around what it would be like to have false history, which we do. How would we know what is true? And, it's no mistake that many, many, many of us have no idea what our family lineage was before a certain time period in the 1800s.
Yep.
Right.
Well, that's when it all shifted, as you know, John.
Yeah. And there's massive There's a lot of people covering this now too. If you go to My Lunch Break, is on Rumble and YouTube. It's an excellent channel for this unveiling the breadcrumbs of false history. And we have a false history of North America. It wasn't barren and undeveloped. There's a lot of stuff that went down in the 1800s which are out of the history books. And if you think about it, you know, we have government indoctrination schools. The entire manifestation of this government apparatus and education is simply designed to erase our history. And if you erase a people's history, they don't know where they came from, then you can conquer them very easily. And so we have a situation where, you know, we're being told that all of this stuff, all of this technology, everything just happened to come about in the late 1800s, and boom, it was everything from the telephone all the way a little bit later to flying to the moon to, you know, lasers and rocket ships and all this kind of stuff. In reality, there was a reset in the 1800s, and people are starting to pick at that bone and trying to recreate really what happened. And a lot of people died, and a lot of people went to these insane asylums, and a lot of orphans were shipped around, and a lot of us are descendants of orphans from the conquered tribe. And the best thing you can do after you conquer a people is to make them not even know they were conquered in the first place. And then you can keep them nice and docile and controlled. And so we have to relearn what really happened, because there's technology that, you know, there's things that happen that people are saying, well, there's not the technology to do that. Well, there was, and there has been for a long time. And this is not the first time where we have nanotech. It's not the first time where we have wireless communication. It's not the first time where we have electricity. And so, again, it's just all we can do is zoom out and open our mind to try to understand this stuff and have a protocol by which to filter information, discern information, and not dismiss things, because we have a lot of catching up to do. And so, you know, when you start getting into things like Tartaria and free energy and all of these things that, you know, we were told a version of science which is not true. We were told that, you know, there was some mysterious Big Bang and then a bunch of space rocks, and then we evolved from pond scum and it's all meaningless, and then we die and we're gone forever. Well, that's not true. And we are much more meaningful and powerful beings than we think. And when we collectively decide to do something, so it's going back to what you said about this is going to have to be fought physically. Yes, and in a bunch of different other ways. But the key is that we unleash our minds, because we're much more powerful than we think we are. Right?
That's part of the physicality, though, John.
Yeah, and we can opt out of so many of these things. If you look at network effects, you look at, you know, MySpace goes from 0 to 150 million users, and 5 years later is down to 30% of what it once was. They need to control our thinking. If they don't, it's all over. And so this internet, this technology is a double-edged sword. On one hand, it can enslave us. It can turn us into a bunch of, you know, checkpoint abiding by automatons, or we can take this information, get it out like we're doing right now. And if people will listen to it and realize that, hey, I don't know where my great-great-great-grandfather came from either. Why? And, you know, why is there all this technology that I'm not told about? Why is 0 point energy a thing? You know, why are there these old buildings in San Francisco that were there since longer than Rome? You know, all of these things we need to consider, and either we do it now or it's not going to be a very bright future. We are in the thick of it now, but the deception is that we're not supposed to know it. We're supposed to think that China's going to storm California and we're going to have nuclear exchange and all this kind of stuff. But really, it's a battle for our mind, and they've used our energy against us to trap us in this mental box. And so that's why I said in the panel that we had, there are no conspiracy theories, right? Everybody should look at everything and give it a fair shake and put it on your table, see what holds up over time. Some stuff will be kind of a counter narrative and some stuff will hold on. But it is, you know, we are in game time, and we should start thinking about frequency and vibration and energy. Tesla was right. Einstein was a fraud, right? And so when we start to realize that not only is it not a financial thing, and not only is it not just my government's a corporation thing, it is a complete human existence paradigm shift that we need to understand. We don't even know who we are. And so we have a lot of catching up to do.
Dude, that's so awesome. It made me think about epigenetic memories and people cleansing. Once you start to cleanse yourself, once you start to live a healthier life, you unlock these memories that are inside your DNA. And then when you hear some of these things that an NPC just thinks is a conspiracy theory, it will resonate with you, and it's literally given me flashes of memories and dreams that I wake up with all the details of what I perceive to be past lives. But that didn't start happening to me until I went through this process of just trying to be a healthier person and clean my body out.
I think you have to also have at least one ego death, if not more, to dial in to that frequency. Because I've been on this kick for about 21 years. So I've had a lot of time to bring in different elements of truth and different practices. And I would argue after the second material ego death that I've had, the truth, I can't pick out the hertz or on the Hawkins scale, but it absolutely resonates. And that's how you know me very well. I'm one of the most no bullshit humans on the planet, not because I choose to be, because I can't not be, is the reality of my being. And then I've got this kind of defense through offense mechanism that I know is in the blood from epigenetics. And then ironically, John, by the timeline, which really, Cedric, the year where the world changed for good was 1871. And you really should learn why I'm saying that. John knows this, but you both need to understand this. And it's not for him and I to regurgitate our interpretation of how we arrived at that, but you need to do the homework to understand why that date is important. Then here, to your earlier point about the internet, John, what's fascinating about the FUD discussion and these different elements of how we're critiquing the Bitcoin, really the Bitcoin community, we're not really critiquing the asset, right? That's the internet's a great example of this could go one way or the other, right? And it's not the asset, the self, or the apparatus that is the internet or the technological advancement is not going to choose for us. We have to do it, right? So what I'm super thankful for and grateful for is the means to do things like this, the means to be opting out of their system. And then I really think we're super close to a lot more disclosures, like the stuff Cliff High's working on, and Dr. Stephen Greer, that is coming June, July. I mean, I don't know exactly.
0 point energy, baby. It's coming.
Yep. I mean,
the disclosure is coming.
Mm-hmm. It's already tried to come out last month, as some people are telling me. I don't know how to.
If we could decentralize energy.
No, not if. When.
Good point. When we decentralize energy, that changes the game in a huge
way. Yeah, we will jump off of a central bank system almost the next day, basically.
Yeah.
So this.
I mean, I don't know if people, a lot of people don't know who Cliff High is or what we're even talking about, but we're talking about a future where you literally have a suitcase that powers everything you need. And it's pulling that energy out of the ether. It's not, you're not adding gas, you're not adding fuel, you're not adding sunlight.
I'm doing this now with electric culture, like a simple withdrawal with copper around it. It's
you're painting a very an optimistic picture of free energy. But
should you choose it?
Sure, but I'm wondering, how the internet could be used in different ways. The asset doesn't care, but how much do you think Bitcoin is going to be what we all hope it's going to be? In this KYC AI world we're entering,
it's not going to be KYC and AI.
I mean,
you can't have it both ways, dude.
Right. We'll get it. I want to ask about that, But just it seems like to me, all these revelations now with Doge are to push us towards a more technocratic financial surveillance blockchain system that has no real freedom in it. And I'm not even sure whatever they're releasing now is actually factual corruption, or I see it all probably just more of the story that they want us to hear so they can move us where they want us, not towards freedom.
I mean, before we get into that, Cedric.
Hey, Bitcoiners, get your sats off your exchange now. This is not a drill. Thea is the world's simplest Bitcoin self-custody solution. With their module multi-sig vaults, you decide how to hold your keys. Thea is working day in and day out to bring you the most intuitive Bitcoin self-custody solution, regardless of how much you own or what your storage goals are. And they support your favorite hardware. Download Thea now for hassle-free Bitcoin self-custody at thea.us/Cedric. That's THEYA.us/CEDRIC.
Just think about what it would mean for you as a Bitcoiner if you had an unlimited supply of free energy.
And then mining is like uber decentralized. It's max decentralized.
Yeah.
Think about what that would do to the Bitcoin network and what that would do to you and your family. That's a game changer. And it then allows us to think about true Bitcoin sovereignty.
I think it's even much bigger than that. I think the natural human state is that of limitless abundance through limitless energy. And the energy had to be artificially suppressed in order to gain the control that they have over us now.
John, that is what our creator intended, and that's why it is in our atmosphere. Like, this isn't that hard to deduce. It's right there for us. That means the source, God, Yahweh, Allah, whatever you want to ascribe to this, the force, right? It's already there.
Right.
Right.
And what were the arcs? What were the arcs of the covenants? What were the pyramids? What were the obelisks doing all around the world simultaneously? Right. Yeah. And if this is, like you were saying before, actually ancient technology that's been hidden from us to control us, to rewrite history, to drain our energy, and to prevent us from becoming the abundant humans that are free and sovereign and can then focus, right? Once we unlock that, all our human basic needs, what are you going to spend your time on? You're going to quickly accelerate out of more to elevate, evolve, raise my consciousness. What's the meaning? What's the purpose? Right? So like Bitcoin is doing this at a beginner level when people are realizing that they can achieve abundance through Bitcoin. It's starting to shift that mindset. We add free energy to that. We add, like Chris was saying, sovereign communication, the ability to be self-reliant, to provide for your family without spending your day toiling on the hamster wheel. Then I think we'll accelerate rapidly, and that's the hopeful and bright future that I see, where we just realign the human mission, and we just, like you said, John, just say no to so many things, because when people step back, like you said, from that 30,000 foot view, it's a very small percentage of the population that's keeping us in this cage. And then if we reach a mass where people are beginning to understand this and then are empowered, I think there'll be a big no, we're not doing this anymore. And I think that's the hopeful vision.
Europe I'm most concerned about in the short term, but I don't think the genie can be put back in the bottle in the United States. Now we're all in Florida, so we might have a different experience, right? But we're not going to succumb to anything else. Now it's just tear it down, nuke it all, default on everything. You're not wait, you had 3.7 trillion Medicaid loss, allegedly a trillion. I'm not paying taxes. Go fuck yourself. Are you kidding me? Like, if
That meme is going to accelerate fast.
like the guys, the jig's up. You're exposed. People are going to realize it's USA, comma Inc. Period. They're going to realize what their social security number is. They're going to realize there's a birth certificate bond, which is terrifying. You can look up the SEC paper. It's so insane. And then they're going to understand what maritime admiralty law is, and understand there's a group of men and their bloodlines that have been doing this shit for a couple thousand years, and we're done. We're done. And so I think it's very, maybe 60-40 on how it's going to progress in terms of how many of us are left after it. But at the same time, I really don't feel that in America, the genie's going back in the bottle. I just think it's a matter of who's going to choose to opt out, who's going to force themselves further on the truth and enlightenment path, who's going to bring others with them, and then who's going to be left behind. And they're not going to ascend, because that's exactly what's happening now. There is an ascension occurring into effectively the new earth.
I want to ask you guys your opinion on this, because when I've had this conversation with some people, the response I get is, but the government has the military. And the military and the police, and they're just going to follow orders. They're just going to follow orders. And if they tell them to go get those guys, we're done. What are your thoughts on that? Or how do you push back on that?
Bring it.
Yeah, I don't think that the military is what people should be nervous about. I think it's more of things like that they're not even thinking about, whether it's 5G or nanotech or the body area network and all of these things that right now we're in a race between us all waking up and realizing the depth of this deception, manipulation, and slavery versus their ability to crack down on it in a medium which can last on. And the only medium which I can see that they could do that in is if enough people don't chew through the layers of the onion fast enough in order to get out. And so they'll throw all this goodness, we're getting rid of all this corruption and all that kind of stuff. But at the same time, they're building an immense AI-backed surveillance state around everybody. They can already track most people just by their body, right? We exert an electromagnetic field, no different than, it's different, but it's, like as if we were little Wi-Fi repeaters going everywhere. Mm-hmm. And we live in a paradigm much different than we think. And so, when the danger is that you chew through a layer of the onion and then you don't keep going, you get satisfied. And you can see this, a perfect example is COVID, right? They said it was from bats. And they knew that was ridiculous, and most people thought that was ridiculous, but they held on to it and held on to it and held on to it. And then finally, reluctantly, they say, it was a lab leak. And they held on to it so long, not because they believed in it, but because they wanted to look like the lab leak was actually true, right? And the lab leak wasn't true because people weren't getting sick because of that. They lit up 10,000 5G towers in Wuhan when everybody was falling over. When they had the cruise ship outside of Miami where everybody got sick, they had just installed a 5G setup. And so they can simulate all of these illnesses by pushing out these harmful EMFs because we are just an antenna walking around, right? And there's helpful frequencies. You can heal. Cathedrals used to be healing centers and energy generation. They get their name from cathode, not from Catholicism. It's so if we realize that we're really in a completely different war than we think, then we can get out of it. It's simply a mind game, and if we opt out, and so I think that that's the race, this race of awareness and enlightenment versus their ability to further control. But it's for all the marbles, because we have all the tools to ensure our freedom and enlightenment and do things that we never thought were possible. Even the term cost of living should never enter our world, that we should have to pay to be alive. It is.
That's really disturbing.
think
It's
of
it's so like that's so simple. It's such a simple question, John. And then when you dwell on it, you're like, what the fuck am I doing?
You don't know you're a slave if you never knew freedom in the first place, and we've never known our natural state.
John, what about the future? How concerned should I be about the future? When did the concept of the future get introduced?
Well, that's I'm not an expert on that, but it resonated with me that just what I've been focused on and what I've noticed in my life being on the treadmill for so long. I mean, we are meant to be constantly projecting our mental capacity into eventualities which don't exist. They teach us, they have all these movies about time travel and Back to the Future, and I watched it when I was 5, and it's awesome. And this is the programming, right? Believe in the future, believe in the future. When all of your power and all of the things that you can do and all of your calmness and all of your awareness and enlightenment and feeling and love and all of these super powerful forces are in the now, and the ever-present, ever-changing now. And
complete
so,
waste of spirit to worry about the future.
It is. It's a complete distraction. And so when we are constantly bombarded by all these eventualities, and most of them are fake, most of them are just through these digital curated projections through these scrying mirrors we call mobile phones. They're just fake constructs to get us to not be in the moment, right? Why should I worry about something that can happen 1 month from now, 6 months from now, when I can do real change and find myself and unravel this web of lies around me and find my true state here and now, and be with all the other people that can do that too, my children, friends, family, be with you guys, right? Nothing else exists. And so when I heard the concept that back in the 1600s, they started introducing this concept of the future, for one, it says how long this curated mind control has been going on, a lot longer than that probably, but it is a way for people to not be in their true state and not be able to focus on what they can really affect change of. And I believe, and there's good indication, for one, that consciousness creates the physical, not the opposite. And that we are all part of that consciousness, whether you call it God or any other label, and that we are all co-creators of this. So if people really wanted to control these creators of this physical experience that we're going through, they would want to control them to where we create what they want. And we don't have to, but we can only do it if we get our heads out of this stuff that doesn't exist.
One of the ways they manifest all of the terror and crime is they project it, we internalize it, and then we externalize it. And when I love studying kind of isolated indigenous, like the Pacific Islanders are a great example. They're my favorite culture, but they were both similar to Native American, Aborigines, etc., dialed in with the spirituality of nature, the harmony that you can be with nature, maximum reverence. But unlike some of the more peaceful tribes, they were also warriors and explorers, right? And so none of these aspects of how strong we are in our God essence, it's in our mitochondria as electrical beings, has to ever have any sort of limitation on it. And we do have relatively modern day examples of where that existed. Now, what's happened to every single one of them? We've been genocided, right, on purpose. That robbing of lineage and history, robbing of culture, and creating effectively like blind mice, right, running around. And then there are these entities. The visual people should have is like these entities feed off of our frequencies, like it's coming out of our biofield. The lower the better, and that shame being the lowest, actually below fear on the Hawkins scale. And shame is what I even feel when I don't know beyond a certain lineage point, right? And then you take You can't trust a DNA test. You shouldn't get one, by the way. Blackstone owns all those companies. You know, and it's very difficult to have a ground to stand on, a leg to stand on, so to speak, spiritually, when you don't know that. And, you know, history rhymes because largely we're kept from it. And we're like, think about the idea of world wars. First off, it's very obvious which group was the bad guys and which group did it, right? And then they had people who were of same cultures destroy each other, like in real time, both before the war, after the war, in the most horrific ways known to man, from the same regions, all the same bloodlines, like all things in common for this entity, right? It's incredible that so many people went along with it.
Mm-hmm.
And it's really deeply sad too, because
Yeah.
war is a construct of this evil. It's not the natural state of humanity.
No, and then they try to tell us that it's in ourselves. It's part of the human condition, right? I don't know about you guys, but I have never wanted to kill anybody. You know,
I do now.
And we are not warlike peoples. We don't get along simply because there's a government telling us to. You know, we are naturally a civil and loving, I'd say, entity, which also then makes you think, well, maybe the people that are doing this are not like us. And maybe they're very different from us, whether you want to say genetically or otherwise. But there is you know, how cruel is that to abuse a people so bad and then to say it is simply your nature?
Yeah, I think the only thing I would add to that is that I think part of the manipulation, draining the energy from the bucket, like you said, is purposefully creating the disparity across humans, or the lack of abundance, which once you're working, you know, if you're working really hard and you're not getting ahead, if you're constantly struggling on the hamster wheel and not getting ahead, if you, the first time you make $100,000, you have to give half of it to the government, right? And through that process, you just build up this despair. I can remember thinking as a young man, like, maybe I should just sell drugs. Maybe I should just go to the other side. Like, maybe I should just do these bad things to make the money, because this is ridiculous. How hard I'd be working to then give so much of it away, and not understanding the game, and not understanding the system, and not understanding how to get ahead. So you can begin to see how inflation, taxation, the education system, the structure in which we live in, this I got to go to the future, I got to go to the future, I'll be rich someday, right? All these things you're talking about can set people up for inducing violence and wanting to take advantage of other humans, where when abundance is prevalent, then I think the natural state is exactly what you said. And so I see the manipulation as a way to get us into those state of minds where we're willing to go to war against each other, because we're pointing at the wrong enemy.
Instead of warring with it with the enemy. And I think
Yes.
Brett Weinstein, and I really like listening to his breakdown of a lot of different aspects of this. But one thing that resonated with me from the first time he started referencing that is that let's just call it Goliath, right? And when you think of it in those terms, and how you were describing the really sad process of debasing the morality and humanity out of a human for a use case, effectively, right? It really is kind of a really good visual. It's David and Goliath, if not even more dramatic than that. And he really hits the nail on the head, though, with the present, which is, you know, that through their apparatus and their entities, NGOs, bureaucratic agencies, blah, 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 they're all full of bad guys. And something that I'm seeing, whether I can't prove that it's substantiated, but it appears that the bad guys are pretty inept and incompetent too.
Yeah.
So I'm going to lean on the side of hope that this is probably the best time in history to combat and win against this evil permanently that we have seen.
I agree. You made me think of something for whatever reason, but I haven't heard in this cycle, in this Bitcoin 4-year cycle, like I have heard in previous, these thoughts and these feelings that Bitcoin is that tool of pulling the rug out from under Goliath. And I can remember when I first grokked Bitcoin, I just had this image of my head of just pulling the rug out from that enemy. And it aligned, prior to that realization of Bitcoin, my future was very pessimistic. And it was very much like there's so many things stacked against us to get to freedom, to get to sovereignty, to get to prosperity. And then all of a sudden I got this vision of like, wow, this is the tool that's going to allow us to rug the evil empire. And I don't hear that right now. That's kind of disturbing to me, because I was, in the 17, 18 cycle. I was in the cycles after that. And I heard those conversations through those cycles. I don't hear it right now. And that's disappointing to me.
Yeah, but I hear now, the repeal of SAB 121, SAB 122, in-kind redemptions, Bitcoin ETFs, all these, Wall Street, the government, strategic Bitcoin reserve, digital asset stockpile. That all makes me, think who created Bitcoin, what purpose is this maybe serving? In terms of maybe who's getting rug pulled here. Do you guys think it's Satoshi's this lone person who's saving humanity?
No.
Or is this some, so then if it's not that, then how is this maybe not a tool for the emancipation of humanity? I'm not sure. Or is it
created the internet, Cedric, and we're using it right now for good. DARPA created,
right, but you also have all these. It's also used for huge, psyops and
fine
narrative steering.
But as John's pointing out, people are choosing to manifest that reality and participate in it. Right now, we're not participating in that reality. Even so far as say, if they are monitoring, go fuck yourself. We don't give a shit. Right? That's part of opting out of that reality and that paradigm. So things aren't as black and white as you're wanting them to be, and I'm guilty of that too.
No, I don't think they're black. I think there's a lot of nuance, and I think that's like, Bitcoin could be, everything it could be, and it might be something 90% of that, or I think the internet is like 4% of what we hoped it to be. Even that 4% is massive for humanity.
I think I think what you're getting at is that there's still a long way to go in crypto sovereignty. That
not with the asset though, Paul. Or
what's that?
Not with the
with human sovereignty, the ability to use the asset in a sovereign way,
as an asset,
and to communicate, but also hopefully that's for the masses, and not just a few who kind of get through all the layers of the onion. As John was saying, I really worry that a lot of people aren't chewing through the layers of the onion.
But they're not going to send them, Cedric.
Right. So let's talk about and I don't know if everyone who is chewing through the layers of the onion is going to ascend. It seems like we're in a fifth generation war now, a depression now, that, like John has been saying, a lot of what the paradigm is not what we think it is. But what can people do on an individual level? John, like, why is it maybe important to homeschool your kids? You guys talked a lot about homesteading. And something there that I think a lot about is like, we could talk a lot about what we need to do in the home, but like, how do you choose where to live and like build roots because of all these other battles we're fighting against maybe the state? So, but John, like, maybe why is homeschooling so important?
Yeah, I think it's that's one aspect of the kind of opt-out. First is not in any particular order, but the money. Obviously, we're talking about Bitcoin. I think Bitcoin is, to your previous point, it's not maybe the right question to say, is it going to work or is it working? It's an idea, right? It is an idea for me of what does it look and smell and taste like to not have your energy and life stolen from you? And if that's in a cryptographic medium, okay, great. And so I don't think that's going away. I think that people need to wake up to take full advantage of it, but not just. And so then you get into people need to re-understand what law is. It's not just for lawyers. In fact, the original 13th Amendment was to get rid of people with titles like Esquire that seem to rule our world at the moment. And so we need to understand the law, get back to that. What's the true law? How do I navigate? How do I assert my rights as a free individual? Freedom is not, you can't be free and not live free. So you have to understand that. You have to understand the education, and that's so getting your kids out of government schools. You need to teach them yourself. And, my kids are reading books about lost history and all kinds of cool stuff, and they're flourishing. And it's a generational war, so we need to put the next freedom-fighting generation out there, right? So that's incredibly critical. You need to get off their food. It's all poisonous and terrible, so that's where the homesteading comes in. You need to live in the physical world, so you need to protect yourself in the physical world. So that's everything from hand-to-hand to Second Amendment rights and all that kind of stuff. And then digital privacy for the digital world. That's very people don't understand how important that is. That's another example of how technology is being used in a positive way for freedom rather than surveillance and enslavement. And then the free energy comes in, and that'll happen as it happens. And then it's a mind game. You just have to enlighten yourself. So if we start pulling back and saying, I'm going to be as little dependent upon the system and this construct as possible, then it's basically a one battle if enough of us do it. It's simply a matter of if we do it, right? And so for me, it's simple. We have all the tools we need. It's not is Trump or Elon Musk going to do anything else? We need to realize that is most likely not in our favor. That this whole somebody gets shot in the ear, which looked super suspect to me. I've shot stuff with a 5.56 round, and it does not look like his ear did afterwards. The technocrats jump on. It's kind of a change of guard, right? To keep the herd marching forward, as opposed to saying, wait a second, no, I'm not satisfied with this. I'm not satisfied until I get to my natural state of complete freedom, right? And so if we do all of those things, then we're out, and we're all connected. So it takes all of us doing it, but we can't control other people doing it. We can simply lead by example. And if we all individually do what we need to do, then the sum of that total is very powerful.
Cedric, and I think the thing that people need to understand, or at least people as on the pathway as we are, because there's never an enlightenment level, and it's never good enough, right? There's such a anchoring to this savior complex that John was alluding to. And it comes from a place of really abject laziness, in my opinion. And it just, I've already accepted that a vast portion are not going to ascend, which is a very kind way of putting what I mean. John, and I'm not saying you're wrong or you're right, but I think there's also, we have to game theory out all the different tangents here. Like there's also some base reality in the fact that not all of this apparatus that's positive here, or potentially positive, is controlled op or part of the op in general. So there is some organic wins occurring for humanity in that whole matrix, right? So I'm never I always want to have that, this part being quant and a decent hedge fund manager. You want weight of all the evidences, and so you try and appraise factors to then draw covariances between the factors, right? So that's all I'm doing with information here. And I think that the longer we go with the path of disclosure, I mean, once we get to June, July, and the free, when people understand what happened to that, I think I don't see how there's not a war that breaks out. But I hope that's not the case. I'm not a pro war. I'm not pro violence anything, right? And in fact, the best warriors were always the ones that learned defense. Like the Spartans didn't go try to conquer the whole planet like the Romans did, right? There's very distinctive between them, and their women could defend themselves, right? So I try to have that as a backdrop of how I'm thinking of all the homesteading skills, the combat, and 5-10 guy who sits in an office 10 hours a day. There's only so much jujitsu or ninja stuff I'm going to learn, or so much tactics, right? So I accept that humility, but I really want people to grasp that there's not one pathway, there's not one reality, and there's not one outcome, right? And this focus on depleting energy, resources, mentally, and capital on trying to predict an outcome in the future is such a waste of time. You cannot do that. I literally do this as a job 24/7 and know the mathematics in and out about predictions and how you align with probability. And there's a best efforts, right? And you can get to about 6 months with kind of a high probability. But
That's exactly the way I think about it. I focus on the here and now, and then try and have optionality. And what are all the probabilities that I could set up to create that optionality? So that means having acreage accessible, not too far away, but far enough away that I'm not near a big city. That means raising animals, not tomatoes and broccoli, and because the calorie density in vegetables is not there. And if you've ever, I grew up in an agricultural family growing fresh produce. It's a ridiculous amount of labor compared to the calories you get out of it. And you just can't survive on it. You're just going to waste all your time and energy growing stuff that's not going to take care of your family. So figuring out how to live with and raise animals is massive. Learning that those animals can survive in nature without paying for you, without paying for anything, right? That like if you put them in the right environment, they'll prosper. So selecting the right animals to prosper where you live. Then learning how to process them, learning how to cook, all of that stuff. The other thing that, and you're thinking of that as an attack vector, at least I am. I think food is a massive attack vector. I think fixing that also fixes your necessity to a large part for the medical system. I look at an organic based, carnivore based diet as the best health insurance. And I know that flies in the face of everything I used to believe, right? I was a vegan for freaking 5 years, not a vegetarian, a vegan. It was the worst health of my entire life, but I thought I was doing the right thing.
Paul, the hard way is the best way to learn. So.
Yeah. It's about that. Like you said earlier, the ego death. I've had not two, I've had dozens. Mm-hmm. So, how do I protect myself from the healthcare system? How do I protect myself from poor food? How do I protect myself from 5G? How do I protect myself from potential war or potential conflict with people that are lacking resources, right? And I think the one thing that a lot of people overlook that I think will be a huge trend for for Gen X will start this trend, and I think it'll progress, is the return of family. And I spent a lot of my years in managing and working inside a trust company and watching all this estate planning that failed. to keep a family together. So doing things like John is doing with educating his own children, trying to facilitate strong family binds between you and your children that would hopefully your knowledge, your education, your leadership can extend beyond one generation. And I think a lot of effort was put into breaking up the American family, making it financially difficult, and so that we had two, both mom and dad working. All of these things, this breakdown of the family unit, leads to a constantly struggling family unit. And if we can rebuild that and we can apply what I call old school Italian family planning,
I was about to do that.
then you can build a future that goes on for many generations. And the only last thing I'll add to this is that I just frame this as the 60-40 portfolio for the future, where 40% of your time and energy and wealth is in resources that are going to provide for your family. 60% is in digital technology and digital assets. And I think having that framework is just sort of helped me make the bigger decision of where I want to allocate my time and my money.
I was just going to articulate, since you teed it up, what does good old-fashioned Italian family planning mean? And what it means, it is not just Italians that did this, but they did this very, very well, and some still do this to this day, is you have a compound, right? The homesteading aspect is, all right, wait a minute. Why the hell would both my kids go try and buy a 4,000 square foot house with a pool?
Right.
What the... We're paying property tax. The CapEx of that's not. And as a professional investor, I'm looking at this not necessarily as, oh yeah, of course I want to be around my kids and you want to have that family dynamic, but just on a risk reward and a efficiency of capital, right? And like, wait a minute, that's a construct. They're convincing everybody they need this and that and vacation home, this, that. Oh, well, if you just communicate with your family, someone can homestead in region A, someone can be in region B, and someone can be region C, all of it planned out as well as you can to provide diversified aspects of solve for the family perpetually, basically.
Yeah. I'll just tell you a funny story. So I got married in Italy, and we had a driver that was, just for the week when we got married in Positano. And when the driver asked us, like, where are you going? Where's home? I said, oh, well, we're actually going back home in California, but then we're moving to Montana. And he's like, just stared at us like, what are you talking about? I said, you're like, but your family's in California? And he's like, why would you leave your family? And we're like, oh, well, this is what we do. We're going to build a big house. We're going to build this future here. We're going to do this. We're going to do that. We're us. And this is the later ego death of like realizing like how foolish a lot of that stuff is. I mean, I love Montana. I love my experience there, but the reality of working as a family to get ahead it's immense, and it provides so much value. And I really think people are just going to they're going to accept this whether they want it or not. The cost of healthcare, the cost of your parents being in a care facility, the cost of your kids' education, the cost of starting a business, the cost of having access to good food. If your family is pooling resources to achieve those goals, and you've set the mission for the family, and you treat your family like you're the CEO of the business, and you're driving that mission and vision, and everybody's on board, it's amazing what you can achieve. And it's not easy. Nothing good is easy, but it's well worth the effort.
It gives the children and grandchildren purpose-driven aspects of what their roles are also.
Yeah.
And I don't let the Sullivan fool you. My mother's bloodline's from Positano. That's her side.
That's awesome.
But I have learned that, and we actually disrupted all of the bullshit estate planning crap, which is all rigged to just destroy anyways when you really carve it up, and all these different deeds and blah blah blah. And now, because I'm very close with my siblings, so is my wife and parents and her parent. We are now like combining actually like 5 or 6 families' inputs into these plans for the grandchildren. And it's a radical just to be a part of it. But then where my skill set comes in, I'm like stoked because then my use case like value goes way higher.
Right.
And it's really, you get the highest return on equity and return on time by doing it.
And you just hit the nail on the head, right? It's like everybody in your family is good at something
Mm-hmm.
and can add value somewhere. And so that division of resources and those division of talents that's like you run through your business can exist within your family, but it's creating the appreciation for those differences as opposed to the conflict of those interests, you know?
And I think there's, part of this whole separating people out and destroying the family unit. That's part of the work that we all have to do to turn that ship around and to rebuild it. And it's been a big focus of mine for the last couple of years, and moved my mother across the country, and she's doing her farmsteading, homesteading. She's a guru and all that. But what I noticed the most is that when we all get together, the generational storytelling starts again. And this was one of the biggest, in my opinion, reasons why you want to break up the family unit, is because if you lose the generational storytelling, the only history or stories or whatever to believe in is the narrative, wherever that narrative is coming from. And so I think as people get closer together, they're going to start really building their own histories in communities and in their family unit. And I don't think that we're going to very much longer have any semblance of a medical system or care for your parents. I mean, anybody thinking that they're going to retire and have enough money to take care of their aging parents it's all changing. Like, this is all getting disrupted. And I don't think it's going to be very long.
It's such a stupid construct. I can't believe people fall for it, John. Like, you're 100% correct. Not only is there not going to be the resources and capital to continue to bankroll the sick care system, but the idea that you should stop doing what you're trained to do and hopefully bring value into an economy and a community is so that it's another degree of control and pathway of abuse, right? Like, that's not the state of nature for humanity. Neither is the rat race, but it's just like, be aware of what this is doing.
Yeah, and I think people are realizing more and more that it was an artificial system to keep people sick. And, healing and natural health is something far different, whether it's herbalism or electroherbalism and grounding and all of those things. I mean, you connecting the dots, right? It used to be that people were in contact with the earth and grounding. It was very anti-inflammatory, and we were all connected through the earth. We have our auras and all that. And then they started producing rubber sole shoes. And then the canes that everybody was walking around in the 1800s, they were meant to help you ground. And then they start putting rubber foots on the bottom of them. And then lo and behold comes COVID, and we're supposed to stand 6 feet apart, because our auras should reach out probably on average about 6 feet. So they try to keep us separated from the earth, separated from each other. And, if we, basically everything if my bone is sticking out of my arm, I will find somebody to put it back together. But other than that, I don't participate in the medical system at all. And there's far other beneficial ways to heal. We just have to look, and luckily it's coming out more and more and more and very quickly.
Yeah. I also, we should probably just say that, like, it sounds like we're saying you have to be an expert in everything. But I know with just you two, I've learned so much between, like, hey, what supplements are you taking, or what food do you like, or what have you tried? What would you do if you had this problem? And so finding your community of people that are open to these ideas will accelerate your education, and those people's experiences will help you learn. So,
and when you learn that, Paul, you pick your pathway. I'm going on 13 some odd years not going to the sick care system. And people, oh, well, you need to get your blood work done. Why? No, I don't.
Yeah.
Well, what if there's something wrong? You know it. So be it. Well, well, and you get the fight, and I go, I'd rather die, and just to shut them up.
Yeah.
And well, what do you mean? And I go, well, I'm sorry, I have honor, and
Yeah.
I am not going to subject myself to that. Like, I walk in there, you think I'm going to listen to what this hack has to say? Like, the poor schleps doesn't know anything. So it's like, in no way, shape, or form is it going to add value to my existence. So I don't go. And as John said, if you're in a car accident or you've got some orthopedic mechanical issue that you could semi-self-diagnose to prevent misdiagnosis in the future, then you're fine. I've almost completely healed 6 herniated discs with meditation and yoga. The body is massively powerful.
That's awesome.
It is, and I think that what we were taught and what we're supposed to believe is that we live in a relatively healthy environment and we just naturally decay. But it's really the opposite. We're naturally very regenerative, powerful, self-healing electromagnetic beings, which have been bombarded by all kinds of horrible toxins and radiation and medicines that don't work, that are really poisons and all of this stuff. And so if we, on one hand, block as much of that stuff as we can and then throw as much goodness at ourselves as we can live very healthy lives and overcome a lot of other problems, including like this mental fog that people are talking about. And, it's
mental fog.
What's that?
No, I said nano mental fog.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, even now, the nanotech, right? Nicotine dissolves these little nanobots, right? They're in the shots, they're in other stuff, they're probably in the chemtrails. And so there's natural remedies for all of it. And then you look back at all the propaganda about these things, and then you can kind of start seeing it very quickly. So to your point, Paul, like, you don't have, your learning momentum increases faster and faster and faster. And once you start gaining steam, then you can very quickly pull yourself out of this paradigm.
Yeah. And one of the things that I discovered might be helpful for people is just once you hit a point where you're willing to just say the crazy shit out loud, you will attract the right people right into your life, and they'll resonate with you and they'll start dumping you information. And it was like literally just getting to that point. And I remember having this conversation with my wife where a couple times she said, like, we would go to a dinner party and I just blah. And she'd be like, I don't know if you should be saying all that stuff to these people. I'm like, I just don't care anymore. I really don't care. If they don't like it, they don't have to listen to it. But it immediately allowed me to like realign my network to a few people that were like, let's talk about that. And that changes everything. So it's also being simply brave enough to say the stuff that you're thinking about out loud, and you will attract that right into your life.
Yes, it's truth or nothing. And what I've, luckily you'll say something. It used to be that it was, 2 years that people thought you were quite kooky, and now it's only a month, so, it's happening faster and faster that, okay, nanotech. Okay. Give it a month and we'll talk,
Yeah, exactly.
I'm getting praised for not having social media now, finally, from people. And then I was going to point out, this is something super hopeful. I stumbled into, at the baseball field for my 11-year-old's Little League, a dialogue of about a dozen of the parents talking about their methylene blue use. And I'm like, I'm walking in all giddy and laughing. And they're like, what the hell is he smoking? I was like, you guys are talking about, how do you know about methylene blue in it? And then I started wearing Bitcoin, pro Bitcoin stuff, and then live free or die, or the Gadsden flag, don't tread on me. And like now the whole thing, in like a matter of a month and a half, these people are all on board with it. And like, okay, well, that's a dozen or so men. Like, if these evil forces come down the baseball field, we're charging right into it. So there is a lot of winning and a lot of positive momentum. And the second derivative of that, in the second order of the rate of change of learning, I don't know that we could even calculate currently, because it's going parabolic.
Mm-hmm.
And
there's a lot of people that I think are looking into this stuff, but they're too shy to really come out with it. And I've had a lot of conversations with some really good people where they'll say something and then I'll say something and then they'll say something like, okay, let's go.
Oh, we're good. Yeah.
Yeah. And so it's
You see that white stripe in the sky?
There's also like you can hack people's system by saying this shit out loud with their phone around, because their phone will pick up what you're talking about and that stuff will start to enter their feed to see if they click on it. So you can really like start to red pill somebody by just being just like, you know, like not giving up and just trying to convince them. And then all of a sudden, all that language and all that stuff, and that starts to show up in their Instagram and their Facebook and their YouTube channel. And then all of a sudden, you know, they don't even realize it, but you've just planted the seed and it's injected into their wall and into their feed.
And on one hand, that's incredibly disturbing because that's,
I know.
That's why I did the whole course. It's launching next month. But yeah, we can, and that goes again where technology is a double-edged sword.
Next time I see you, John, I'm going to be talking about like, getting free healthcare and stimmy checks and
exactly. No, it's we really have all the tools we need to win this thing, and this information is spreading virally, and we're not good at thinking in exponential terms. But how many people are talking about the things that they never would have talked about even in 2022? It's really insane. And you see like whether it's directed energy weapons blasting California or Maui or anything else. I mean, okay, now everybody knows about the Pantone blue. And that's just kind of already behind us.
Which is laser lemon.
Yeah.
That's the name of that color blue.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
It's called laser lemon.
Wow.
That's an interesting coincidence, right?
Yeah, yeah. No, so it's I'm very hopeful, but it's I think the name of the game is everybody has to stop being afraid and take ultimate responsibility for their lives. Because to your point about the savior complex, I'm fine if the leaders are doing good, and I think some of them probably are, but I'm not going to bank on it. And that doesn't relinquish me of my personal responsibility to battle, right? To battle mentally and physically and every other medium. And, I think that if we just say, look, we'll judge them until the end, but if they're doing good, great, but I think, there is a portion of the population that will say, oh, we're winning because they want to win, right? But it's not that easy. And, it's a far deeper battle. And I think really it's going to force people to understand who they are and go through all that ego death. And if they do, it's going to be a very, I can't imagine a more meaningful time to be alive.
I think that's my view, and that this is the greatest time of opportunity, abundance, and peace and prosperity that I think we've seen, at least that we're conscious of, John, since so much has been removed. So I'm sure this has happened on many other timelines, right, in many different iterations. But for the ones we're aware of or largely been taught, this appears to be the best shot. And I think more so on every dialogue I have is in a historical crowd where I have a lot of friends that are historians, not necessarily Bitcoiners, the amount of people that are realizing what World War I and World War II really were and who was the actual enemy in that. I get to be silent in the conversation and not riffing and explaining, well, that wasn't the bad guy. And we killed German POWs after the war ended, and we weren't, blah, blah, blah. And that's just indicative of the resonance of truth, like kind of breaking through the darkness's construct. And that, just bearing witness to that, Bitcoin, 100K, sovereign asset, like I'm good. Like this has already gotten like further in the positive realm than I thought. Like, so I can go quietly and peacefully already. That's how content I am with the progress I've seen. So everything from here is like, all right, well, let's rid it for good. And that's where I'm getting a little bit more physical on my description of what we should do, because I'm so inspired by where we already got to.
But I think one of the things that well, Cedric and I live near each other, so we talk about this kind of stuff a lot. And I think if Cedric, if I'm representing your thoughts properly, is that you're concerned that a large percentage of the population isn't going to come along with us, and that they would then resent us. Is that accurate?
Or just not be as free.
They're not going to survive.
Both and or.
They're not going to survive it, Cedric.
And or survive it. Or,
They're not going
to. I mean,
like, you just got to come to peace with it. It's too late.
I mean, I think it's an individual path to walk. And
But John, if you took 8 vaccines, you're done. It's too late for you.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not saying that 100% there's going to be some what we should call tragic events coming up. But in the end, all we can do is what we can do individually, right? And so we can spread the word. We've all had the experiences of talking with people or family members or whatever, and we plead and we talk and we do our best to try to get people to realize something, and they can't see it. And it is unfortunately just something we have to deal with, because there's no other choice, right? If somebody, reverts back into, I need to go take my medicine and you're crazy and you're the problem and all of this, thinking on the left-right paradigm. I mean, imagine that, we're at least 3-dimensional beings thinking in a 2-dimensional paradigm for how we should, interact with politics and nonsense. And so, all we can do is say, hey, come out here outside of this matrix. But yeah, it's the ones that will wake up or are the ones that'll make the difference. Mm-hmm. And so I think it's just about empathy, where I think the thing that we shouldn't do is belittle people or demonize them because they're still in this mental construct, because we were all born into it, and it could have very well happened that I never saw my way out either.
Mm-hmm. So I'm not going to say his name because he runs a publicly traded company, but a good friend of mine was on the board. He's the most quoted mRNA specialist in the world. And he was on the board of Moderna's scientific advisory board, not the executive board. And he left in 2014, told them they were batshit crazy, that they were going to kill everybody if they followed through with this. So, I was lucky that I had that resource when COVID came out, and I was immediately made a call to him. Actually, my daughter was in the hospital with a horrible abscess in her abdomen. We had no idea where it came from. We had to fight the medical system because we literally had one expert come in and say, oh, it's her ovary, we need to take it out. Another expert come in and, accuse me of rape. Another expert come in and say it's cancer. And we're going, what the fuck is going on here? The only person that we could communicate with logically was the radiologist, because they could give us an image and they could show us exactly what was going on. And we're like, there's no fucking way that's her ovary. That's in the middle of her stomach. There's no fucking way. So we took control, we got it drained, and in 2 weeks we're out of there. But while we were there, I'm on my phone and people are, falling like flies in China. So I picked up the phone and called him, and he's like, I can point you to the patent. I can show you when this was created. Do not fear COVID. It's no worse than a highly contagious flu, and do not get the vaccine. And he told me that when people were dropping in China in December, December of 2019. And so I was lucky, but you're right, John. There's a lot of people that I tell that story to and tried to communicate this to that would not believe me, that thought I was totally insane, including my parents who went and got vaccinated. And they stopped after the second shot. But like coming to this realization. If you have not yet come to the realization that you were injected with a poison, it's probably too late for you. If you've come to that realization, you are now living with a biological weapon that is attacking you from the inside. And you have to take supplements to flush out spike protein that your body is producing. And you have to take supplements to flush out the lipid nanoparticles. And these are things like John was saying, nicotine, you can get knick-knack lozenges, and this nicotine will instantly start to flush out lipid nanoparticles. EDTA will flush out lipid nanoparticles. Zinc, quercetin, D, C will help destroy spike protein, and bromelain and curcumin will help flush those spike protein out of your system. And you're going to have to take that the rest of your life to maximize what you have left. And that's just the reality. And don't, you can hate the messenger, but you can do your own research. There's a lot of great people that are focused on this, but denying it is limiting the time you're going to have with your family. And that's just the bottom line.
Yeah, I think it goes even further, because I've had conversations where it's like, okay, yeah, that vaccine, but the rest are good. Right? The rest are fine.
Right.
And,
not that kind of slavery, but this nicer kind of slavery.
Yeah, I mean, it's the same companies, right? But then you start to research about virology in general, right? Where if somebody's explained to you the process by which to isolate a virus, you're like, that's not scientific at all. I mean, how do you know anything?
Wait, John, we haven't isolated a virus, have we?
No, we haven't. We've just mixed a bunch of bovine snot into a bunch of cells and blended it up. And then for example, Dr. Roy O'Rife, his nephew has the Rife Machine Company. I have one. I like it. And his uncle also developed a telescope or a microscope which could view things as small as a virus, and then he was attacked, and that was taken away. And so, we're always meant to believe in these small things that we can't see and just take their word for it, And so I think, basically everything coming from modern medicine should be looked at as an attack, whether it's childhood vaccines. You have what, 40, 50, 60 of them now? 72. It's insane.
72.
And so when you start connecting the dots, it's been the whole time, the entire modern medical field has always been to suppress the human condition and to dumb us down. So we have to reject it all.
John, when I realized what you're talking about, I was shocked at how resilient humans are.
Yeah, we're hard to kill.
Like the amount of toxicity that's pumped into our system through our food, through medical care, through the toxic chemicals we use for cleaning and disinfect, whatever we do.
Everything.
It's shocking how resilient we are.
Dude, look at how many bullets you can take, right? They go, oh, wait, Paul, it's better if it goes all the way through your body, right? Like, we're pretty damn hard to kill. We're pretty resilient. We're pretty brilliant, while also having the other side of the spectrum. And what I think, John, you're pointing to, which is a good way to cap this off, is that we're scratching the surface of human potentiality because it's been kept. And if we're able to do this, which I'm super grateful and honored to do with you, my friends, and we're at 1/10 of our potentiality and capacity. Wow. Getting to like our 6/10 of that is what an exciting path and process that would be.
I might be closer to 1/100th, but
carry.
I'll catch up to you, Chris.
I keep going back down to level, because I keep going, wait, I know nothing, and I keep getting slammed down. But I'm just super, super grateful to have these dialogues with you openly, so that we're sharing notes. And I'm super impressed, guys, because I have been on this pathway, as I mentioned, about 21 years, and I'm a voracious reader. And so I've always felt like almost like way ahead of those who are waking up. because it's such a volume of vast knowledge. And then John, when you and I met and we went down the Tartaria path initially, I was like, holy shit, how does he know about that? Because it's just so rare.
Yeah.
You know?
And we actually got connected. I saw a podcast of his with Robert Breedlove, and he mentioned that a building generated energy, and I was like, wait, you don't hear that every day from a Bitcoiner.
Yeah.
So it's happening, and our potential is immense. And if we just get out of our own ways and realize it collectively, then there's no stopping us. So it's really our choice.
Gentlemen, this has been an honor and a privilege. This spiritual warrior hang. I'll leave it to each of you for parting words, and let listeners know where they can find you and your work. Paul, you want to start off?
Sure. Paul. I don't even remember what my handle is. I'm on X, Paul Tarantino. I don't know if it's hyphenated or what it is, but that's where you can find me and message me.
Yeah, I'm on a soon-to-be launched digital privacy platform, digitalprivacysessions.io. That's also Digital Privacy X on X, and my personal is Truth in Logic BTC on X.
I am nowhere on purpose, but websites HyperionDecimus.com. There's a way you can email into our system, and then it'll parse out to where you can communicate directly with me. And if you spend the time to do that, then I will graciously lend my time to communicate back to you.
Fellas, this has been so dope. We'll have to do it again sometime.
Thank you for putting us all
Absolutely.
together, Cedric.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks for tuning in to this episode of the Bitcoin Matrix. If you enjoyed the conversation, don't forget to like, subscribe, and drop a comment below with any questions or thoughts you may have. We'd love to hear from you. You can support the show by checking out our sponsors and affiliate links in the description. It helps keep bringing you great content while connecting you with awesome products that I believe in. Share this episodes with your friends, family, or anyone curious about Bitcoin. And let's keep growing this community together. Stay curious, keep stacking, and I'll catch you in the next one.